Sarah Paige, welcome to the Carrie Croft Show.
Thanks for having me. I'm
No,
excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you here. So Sarah, you work for ART Risk,
Yes.
which is a life insurance company, and you guys do a lot of stuff for surrogacy, infertility, etc. And so,
Yes.
as I just told you, I am creating a workshop for people to figure out how to find their dream surrogate on their own. And so, I want to pack my workshop with a lot of really great stuff that would be a value add for people. And so, you're tucked away in my workshop, and we'll also put you outside, and for anybody who wants to see it on the outside too. But thank you for being here, and I'm really excited to get every nook and cranny out of your brain and into this thing for people to get all the information they need,
Yeah,
because it's very, very important.
I love it.
So tell me a little bit more about your job there at ART.
Yeah, perfect. I'm the residing chief operating officer. So I essentially make sure that the company is running as well as it possibly can be. I've been with the company for 15 years and started, honestly, it was an in between job. And I ended up really liking what I was doing. I liked it because my background's education, and I felt like I could talk to intended parents and talk to industry professionals and teach them about everything. Um, as a person, I'm much more along the lines of making sure that everyone feels really good about decisions that they're making. And I kind of said to you a little earlier, but anyone that works with us becomes a part of our tribe. And my goal is to protect you and make sure that you're good and that you feel really confident in what you're doing. There's a lot of financial risks when you're working through a surrogacy journey or an IVF journey. So ultimately, I want to make sure that you understand it, feel good, and that your risks are protected. Um, with that mentality, I started a nonprofit last year with some wonderful, wonderful people who are, it's called Insurance Access and Equity Alliance. And our goal is to create not only education around how to access insurance in general for, again, it's mostly with the assisted reproductive technology community. So a lot of IVF, surrogacy, egg donors. But we also are working on legislation. So we have a couple bills that we're working on right now. We have one that's already dropped in California for this legislative session. So again, trying to make it so that it's easier to access across the board, trying to make it a little less expensive because it's a crazy, it's a crazy amount of money for an intended parent going through that. And then I also sit on, I'm an officer of the Society for Ethics in Egg Donation and Surrogacy. And it's a member-driven organization where we get together and try and make sure that, again, going back to safety, risk, and that people are really comfortable and confident working with who they're working with. We set up guidelines to make sure that the people that are members of SEEDS are following the guidelines and are creating really, hopefully, ethical practices.
What are some of the first things that you guys do when you're talking to an intended parent? Like, what are the first steps?
Yeah, so first step is we actually ask about their journey. We ask them kind of how we got here. And not that my view is I always want you to disclose what you're comfortable disclosing. But part of it is understanding, where you're coming from and how you got to this point of needing to have a surrogate or wanting to have a surrogate. And then we go through and we talk about where your surrogate's located, where you're located, because that can make a difference in options for you. We talk about your contract, what's in your contract, what are you legally required to cover for the gestational carrier or for the journey. And then we start talking about the different products. What do we have? What can we use with your journey? It's very tailored. So we have dedicated agents that work with intended parents directly to go through those conversations to make sure that we're hitting all the key points. And then we kind of outline, hey, this is what we think would be best for your journey. And at the end of the day, our view is you're going to choose the products or the services that you feel confident in and want to be able to help mitigate any risk that you see as risk. Sometimes I may see it as risk, but you as a human are like, I'm okay with that. And so then I'm like, okay, well, I'm okay with that too. unless you're telling me you're not doing any insurance ever. And then then we'll talk.
My advice, and again, everything is risk. You have to weigh the risk in terms of
Yes.
how much is it going to cost versus
Yes.
like the odds of this happening. Better safe than sorry. And
Yes.
if there are, and again, knowledge is power. So understanding the nuances and the different categories and the different things
Mm-hmm.
that can be covered, and understanding what is and is not covered, because you don't want some landmine. These landmines can be very costly.
Yes.
So that's what I'm trying to really educate people on in this particular
Yep.
workshop is like, okay, let's step back, and even if you choose not to do something because you
Hmm.
feel like, okay, we've kind of calculated through this risk, in our mind, and we don't
Right.
need this. Okay,
Right.
but at least you've looked at that, you've flushed it out, and it's not going to be a surprise at the end of the day.
Right.
So let's do this. I've got a lot of questions here, but we don't necessarily have to like go through all these unless I want this to be very collaborative with
Yeah.
you. You're the
Love
expert,
it.
right? So do you think it makes sense to maybe start with what types of products and life insurance policies are normally best suited
Yeah.
for the intended parent? And what
Yeah.
you would say would be like a baseline, like this is what you do not want to forego.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, oh my gosh, I feel like there's so many different ways. So, kind of taking it just from the life insurance perspective, um, my I would say minimum of 500,000 for the gestational carrier. You may see attorneys writing in the 250, but for me, there's no reason. It's not cost prohibitive to increase it to 500,000.
Right.
And I mean, it's the difference between a couple $100s for you as an intended parent, but exponentially increases for the family
Yep.
of the gestational carrier. And I would say there's things that you can attach to the accidental death policy or the life insurance policy. You can attach what's called like loss of reproductive organs, which can happen. She can lose a fallopian tube, she can lose a uterus, she can have a hysterectomy. There are things that happen during the course of the pregnancy or after the pregnancy that may happen. um, so we want to protect against that. If she became permanently disabled, which means that there's usually 5 factors of life. And if you are not able to do one of those factors, then that's considered a permanent disability. It could be walking, talking, breathing on your own, dressing yourself. Like there's certain things that the insurance company has laid out and said, if you can't do these anymore, these
Yeah.
are like life normal skills that everyone should have. And if you can't, then we're going to fall underneath the level of disability. Um, so that's something they could get to. And then honestly brand new is, which wasn't available for your journey, which is miscarriage insurance, where if the gestational carrier has a miscarriage, if there's a stillbirth, or if the child doesn't make it past 48 hours after being born, there's insurance to cover and to recoup any of the financial loss that occurred. So that means paying the gestational carrier's compensation, reimbursing for that. It means reimbursing for any of the medical expenses that occurred. It means reimbursing for insurances that were purchased, reimbursing your attorney fees.
That's
So
huge.
it's huge. It's taken us 3 years and we just got it to market January 1st. So it's,
Wow.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
How much is that a
So
month?
that's going to range depending on kind of um, how much you're spending in your journey, because it's tailored to that. So it's anywhere from 800 to 3,000, but again, that's going to depend on how much, right, how much the gestational carrier's compensation is. Are you
Yeah.
using an agency? Not. So
It's interesting because
yeah.
some of these agencies that I talk to, their value proposition for the reason why they charge you so much
Yeah.
is because they're guaranteeing you if something happens, they're guaranteeing you like a second or a third,
Yeah.
kind of that insurance policy.
Right.
So I feel like you having that miscarriage policy in place sort of blows that. I mean, it makes that less appealing, right?
Yeah. I think especially if an agency is using that as their value proposition, I
Well,
think
it
like,
is because
yeah.
when you think about it, and I know for a fact because, and it's not necessarily like they positioned it that specific way to me, but you
Right.
can read between the lines. So, as an intended parent, looking at these agencies, the ones who charged you the 150,
Yeah.
the
All
you're reach,
inclusives.
it's all include,
Yeah.
right? It's like all
Yeah.
inclusive, which sounds crazy, right? Like you're planning a trip to
Yeah.
Mexico or something.
Yeah.
But it's like, oh yeah, so we'll guarantee you, no matter what happens, if there's a miscarriage or something, you'll get we'll keep moving here, and then you're like, oh, okay, so that's worth paying, a
Right.
mortgage or whatever. Okay, I feel like that's a huge update.
It is a huge update. And um, you know, the all inclusive programs are they work for some, and some people really like the guarantee of it all. Um, but to be perfectly honest, there just never is an actual guarantee.
Mm-mm.
There just isn't. So, um, what I love about the insurance aspect of it is that if it happens, it's written in a policy, and right, and then you can recoup as much as possible to be able to go again if that works. If there's embryos, if you want to do that, if emotionally you're ready, right? Like there's a lot, obviously,
Yeah.
that factors into
So
progressing
going
forward.
back, like the with the one you start, like the life insurance accidental death policy, that's kind of like the granddaddy policy. That's the big one in terms of if something happens to your surrogate, God forbid, then what that means is that they would get compensated the $500,000. But
Yeah,
also, I think we might have even done
I
750,000.
love it.
Because that's what I mean, when you think about this, let's, for the intended parent here, put yourself in the shoes of this family.
Yep,
And on the very, very slim chance that something unthinkable happens, wouldn't you want them to have as much as possible in that
yep,
situation? So like, and then it becomes like, what can you afford, right? So like, oh, well, then in that
right,
case, I'll do $1 million policy, right? But then
right,
you get charged even more. So I think we
right.
did 750,000. And then another thing you have to remember too is that having this in place, they can't come after you personally.
Yes.
And
I,
that's huge.
yes. Yes. I think that's a little bit of, sometimes people think that the life insurance, like if something were to happen and you didn't have it in place, you have to pay them that money. That's not it. What it does is it protects them. It protects you as an intended parent against the gestational carrier's family essentially suing for a wrongful death claim. And
Right.
that's really what it's for. It's in outside of the protection for the gestational carrier. Like that's first and foremost. And then there's the second part of it that then protects the intended parent from any sort of wrongful death suit.
Yeah. So my advice to people watching this is where it's financially reasonable for you,
Yeah.
put yourself in the shoes of this family who is sacrificing a lot to do this on behalf of your family and
Yeah.
just do the right thing by them.
Yeah.
I mean, I
Yep.
would go for 500 to 750 and out of blink of an eye. Especially if you're doing this on your own, you're not spending that huge cost with the agency. Okay.
Right.
So I think we can
Right.
afford a little more wiggle room here
Right.
with maybe giving in that bucket.
Yeah. And we are talking about moving from, let's say, a, you know, middle $600 policy up to like a $1,300 policy. So
Mhm.
it does pretty much almost double the cost of it. Um, but in the scope of the journey and the scope of what the gestational carrier could get, and the scope of what we talked about earlier, your risks, it really does make it worth it to do it. Again, if there's the financial ability to do so.
Yeah. Okay, so you've got that one, the
Yeah.
life insurance accidental death, and then
Yeah.
the organ rider, which again is if they lose something in their body.
Yeah.
So I did the organ rider, and I feel like the organ rider isn't that expensive.
It's not. It's not. It starts at $250 and it goes up to about 900. But again, that's going to be dependent on what's in your contract. So we never want anyone to purchase more than what they're legally required to purchase. Number one, the insurance company won't pay more than you're required to pay out.
Yeah.
So it depends. Sometimes they're split like 5,000, 10,000, meaning if she has a hysterectomy, she'll get paid $10,000.
Yeah.
And if she has, let's say, a loss of an ovary or fallopian tube, that it can be up to 5,000. So we have those splits. We just increased the amount up to 1,530. Just as we started seeing more contracts that were coming back with some higher numbers in there. And so we did just increase the insurance so that it can go up to 30,000 if there's a total loss of hysterectomy, essentially.
Okay. So big granddaddy, life insurance accidental
Yeah.
death, organ rider, miscarriage now, which I'm a huge fan of. I'm so
Yeah.
excited about that.
Me
And
too.
then what about the people who don't have their own health insurance
Yeah.
coverage, which is another huge landmine?
Huge thing. So the first thing that we always do is we always check, again, going back to, do you have it? Yes or no. So we do what we call policy validations. If they don't have any insurance or their insurance doesn't work, which happens a lot, then if we're in ACA, which is the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, open enrollment, then we get that. And that is the best thing to do. It's the most comprehensive, it's the least expensive. And I say least expensive, like really tongue in cheek, because it's still $18,000. It's insane how much insurance is. So, but it's less expensive
Mm.
than a Lloyd's of London policy, which is 30,000. So,
Yeah.
yeah, we would look and vet what insurance is out there on the open market. The downfall of ACA, which I know we all feel, especially if you're trying to get your own insurance out on the market, is that it's only available very specific times of the year. So you're looking from November to pretty much January 15th, and that's the only time you can get it. So when you're starting journeys at any time in the year, that's something you have to consider, is that there may be even a little bit longer of a wait after you've already waited so long to get to that place where we can purchase that health insurance.
Hmm. If your surrogate can't work, what's that? Like short-term
Disability.
disability? So you have
Yeah.
that coverage too.
Yeah. So the short-term disability is going to be, again, it works in both ways. Even if she's not working, it would cover if she needed to be on bed rest, and let's say that she had to get a housekeeper once a week. She had to have childcare in the house. It would cover those costs. And if she is working, then it would cover lost wages. So the disability policy kind of covers both depending on what those needs may be. So if she is employed, then absolutely there's a disability policy that we can get. If she goes out on bed rest, it'll cover lost wages. And if she's not employed and is used to taking care as a stay-at-home mom, taking care of the house, taking care of the kids, and needs that extra support, then it will cover that extra support for her.
Are those the big ones that I just covered, or are there others that I just didn't have to deal with that you see frequently?
I think those are the biggest ones. The health insurance, life insurance, disability are kind of like our three that feel like we're on a call every day, every
Mhm.
hour for, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
There's other ones that are available that even if they're not available, like one of the conversations I like to have with everybody is newborn. Because even as an intended parent, we still have to look to see, does your newborn insurance, the insurance that you currently have, is it going to cover at the hospital where the surrogate's going to deliver? And what's the language about adding the newborn to your policy? Um, there's policies that we find have language that says you have to access maternity in order to add the newborn to your policy. It's archaic language. It's terrible. And then the next language is, well, if you're adopting. And I'm like, well, okay, hold on. This is not an adoption. so so then that's when we have to go back to the insurance company and argue with them, file grievances, file appeals, talk to their attorneys so that we can get that language change in there. So that's actually really overlooked by a lot of intended parents going through this, because there is an assumption, as there should be. This should not be an issue in any capacity. There's an assumption that I have a baby, I'm going to add it onto my policy, whether it's an adoption, surrogacy, or I birthed it. I should be able to, my child.
Right.
I can add my child to my policy. That's my right with this insurance. But there's these little nuances and language variations that cause problems. And so one of our jobs is we actually go through that and see, are there going to be any issues when you go to add the baby to your insurance? And then we work through that beforehand.
You would think that people would get their shit together by now. I
I,
think that.
Carrie, I swear.
I mean, what is it? Because that's wasting
I
your time too to have the same argument over and over again. It's like
over and over, constantly.
what am I missing?
It's my biggest gripe is that insurance companies do not stay up with the times and the social changes that happen on the IVF side. Like they just expanded the definition of IVF to include a single person. It just happened. So there's so much that like feels like we're just missing out on language changes that we need to see.
So it makes me want to just take to the internet and ask the question, like, why? But I guess what am I missing? I feel like you feel like you're missing something when I feel like reasonable people who are
Yeah.
working together and
Yeah.
you're having the same conversations over and over and over again, wouldn't somebody in the organization be like, hey, maybe we need to like upgrade this?
So we do that. The main problem, honestly, is that all of these insurance policies are either at different insurance companies or they're departmentalized. So we may argue this with an insurance policy that's owned by, let's say, a big corporation, I don't know, and we have to argue it with that company, but the employer owns the policy. So now I'm just arguing with an employer. I'm not arguing with the insurance company. And then I have to go back and I have to then argue with the insurance company. And I have to argue it in 3 different levels. I have to argue it for individual, I have to argue it for small group, and then I have to argue it for large group. So the ideal is to get to like the state Department of Insurance, but then I'm still arguing it across 50 different states, which is what we have to do on a regular basis.
Just
Because
talk about the inefficiency of that.
I mean, it's what's wild about what I think is what's wild about insurance, that you think that there are all these laws that are very like similar across the board, but there's so many nuances and like different language changes and shifts, and each department in each state works differently about who handles what parts of the insurance, and to try and navigate it is it's hard, but it's also just time consuming. I
Right.
mean,
Get your shit together.
that's how it feels on a consistent basis.
Is there anything else that you would say for an intended parent that you would want them to know? Like someone in this position who's sitting there at the starting block
Yeah.
that you want to make sure that we cover?
Yeah. I would say it's not even insurance related. I think it's going to go back to the heart of what you're doing, which is align yourself with really good people, because you need to rely on them. You need to trust them. They're going to be with you for probably about 2 years, start to finish, even after. You want them to rejoice with you. You want them to feel your frustrations. You want them to support you during this. And you have to feel it. Like I tell everyone, I'm like, it's a vibe. Whoever you're working with, it's a complete vibe. Like outside of their professional accolades, outside of, their BBB ratings, whatever that is, do you get along with them? Do you like them? Do you feel supported by them? Do you feel like their communication is what you need? All of that is going to make or break and really influence your journey. So I think that's my biggest recommendation always, is feel good about who you're working with and the company you're working with.
Yep.
Always.
And then what's the best way if somebody is watching this, they're like, you know what, I love this girl, I love this company, I just want to go straight to you guys?
Yeah, call us. You're always welcome to call us. And then if you ever email over, it's info at yourinsuranceresource.com. So you can email, you can go to our website, put in a contact form.
Yep.
You could find me on Facebook or Instagram and direct message me that way.
What is your, because I feel like we're friends now.
That's fine. We are.
What is your handle, ma'am?
So my personal handle is S Paige, Paige 0318. Art Risk Solutions has one, so it's ART period risk period solutions.
I appreciate you, Sarah. Thank you so much
You're
for joining
welcome.
the show. And you've been just a wealth of knowledge. And I know that people who are watching this are going to get something out of it and just feel protected and feel a little more in this very overwhelming journey that is such an extraordinary experience that not many people go through.
Yeah.
Just giving them a little more peace of mind
Yeah.
and protection for not only them, but the surrogate and the whole journey. So thank you.
You're welcome.
And
You're
now
welcome.
friends,
Thank you.
So, call me.
I love it. So where are you located?
I'm in Columbus, Ohio.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like too far.
No. We can reach each other. Listen. Honey.